Hello, I'm Lorelei Drock. I am a 49-year-old wife and mother. I live in Missouri, but I grew up and lived in Wisconsin up until a few years ago. So all of my experiences were in Wisconsin. I was 7 years old for my first experience. I was with my aunt, my uncle, and my brother. We decided to take a walk. We lived on like 191 acres. It used to be a quarry, so they struck water, these natural springs. There were like 4 or 5 different ponds, but there was a really large one that we used for fishing. And the other end, we created like a swimming hole where we had built out of pallets and boards, they had built like a pier going out probably maybe like 6 or 8 feet out into the deepest part, which was about 30 foot. Well, this day my brother wanted to go check on the fish and if they were spawning because we had a lot of bluegills there. So, like my mom was cooking dinner, so she's like, "Take your little sister, you gotta go." And so we walked down there, which is about like maybe a half mile. There were 2 different entrances to this area. My brother and my uncle went to the one entrance where the fish normally spawn, but I wanted to go see the other end by the swimming area. So my aunt walked me over there. Well, being 7, I wanted to be out close as I could get to the water. So I walked all the way to the end of the pier, and it was really sunny. I remember it was late afternoon, but the sun was like sparkling off all the water, and I was looking off to the left, but then I started to feel like almost like I was moving with the floating bridge pier, and I was sitting there, and I'm like, whoa, that's too much. So at that point, my aunt said, I need to check on your uncle. She always was she get anxious if she's too far away from him kind of person. She's like, I need to go check on him. Are you going to be okay? Can you behave? Be careful. I'm like, yeah, sure. So I went to the other side of the pier, and I just kind of didn't feel right. It was almost like starting to go out of body. It was the weirdest sensation, like I still felt woozy or just something weird. And even though the light wasn't shining there, I just remember still feeling lulled. And my next literal memory is being in the water, sinking, and watching the bubbles come out in front of my face and realizing that was the last of my air. If I breathe in, I'm going to drown. I can't swim. And as soon as I said, I'm going to drown, I literally left my body and saw it continue to sink and the bubbles coming up. And then I was above, my consciousness was above everything. And I was looking down at that and my, my hair floating through the water, as it sunk in that long hair like I do now. And as soon as I related, I saw my body sinking. Next thing I was connecting to, from my understanding now, the consciousness of my brother, my uncle, and my aunt, and then later my mother. I heard their thoughts. My brother was from his perspective, he was going, can I swim or run faster to save her? My uncle was like, can I get there? And, feeling guilty, we're responsible. We're the adults. We're supposed to be watching her. And my aunt must have heard probably the splash. She had turned around. She was partway down the path to the other entrance. So she came running back and she was just thinking I can't swim either. How am I going to save her? They're going to blame us, and maybe if I do this or that, the whole time she's thinking if I hang on to this, maybe I can reach her. If I slip, we're both going to die. All of these thoughts were going through her head. So as soon as I acknowledged all that, I started to go higher. I felt my consciousness going higher up, and I could see more like a large view for miles. And that's when I connected with my mother's consciousness back at home. And she was in the kitchen cooking chili, I believe it was, chopping veggies and stuff. And her thought process was I wonder if they're catching anything or found anything. And when they'll be home for supper, is it going to be ready on time? Kind of, just the standard housewife mom kind of thought. So as soon as I connected with her, my neck, like conscious, just literally in like this whole area that seemed almost like rolling clouds, kind of foggy, kind of white. I sensed there was like a guide or someone there with me, but I couldn't see anyone. I don't remember seeing like a being. But in front of me seemed like higher up or maybe up steps. I don't quite have a recollection other than there was this beautiful being within this bright white light that emanated out, and it went from like white to a bright yellow to a deeper amber to an orange, but it just seemed like it was spread out for like my whole entire vision was this, and you could kind of make out the being in the middle. And I had this understanding like there was a portal or something like behind him, like an archway, like I was being, like, are you to go through this? And they're like, this is, you have more to do, you cannot stay. I heard telepathically, but it wasn't until I kept saying, no, I'm not, you can't make me. I have kind of like an understanding or recollection, like they had showed me what my life would be like to go back to, and I'm like, I'm not going back to that, and so there was literally like this back and forth. Here's me basically arguing. I'm like, I'm not going back to that. And finally, there was this very deep, authoritative male voice that said, you have to go back. You have more to do. And I knew with that voice, like, there's no more arguing. I'll go, but reluctantly kind of thing. So the next thing, I was conscious of my body and I was back looking at it. By then, from recollection, what they describe, because it's like I was half seeing it. Spirit time to me, from all of my experiences, kind of all together. It's in the now moment. Like, so some things, there's no linear exactly, but my uncle had helped my aunt pull me in. She had grabbed me by my fingertips and was like trying to get me to the pier. And then they had finally gotten me out. By that time he had gotten there, and my uncle, I think, carried me up onto the embankment because there was an incline and then here. So I saw my body laying on its side in the grass right at the top of there. But that I recall, there was no water in my lungs. There was nothing other than I didn't want to speak. Like they said, I didn't speak maybe till the next day. But for me, as my consciousness or my spirit, I was still fighting. Like, I'm not going in there. I wouldn't go in there. Like, that's my body. Yeah, I got to stay here with it. But I wasn't quite integrated into it. And I think it took me a long time. Like, you could say months, years. Like, I was more out than in. I just wasn't going to do it. Like, you're making me, but I don't have to do it easily. And so, but I didn't speak till the next day. And that's when I spoke to my brother. I was like, why were you thinking that? You can't run or swim faster. And he's like, he's like, how did you know? What? And then they knew something had happened to me, and I had told my mother. But my family had a lot of what you would call spiritual or paranormal activity and gifts and things. So even though my mother was raised Catholic, and I think my dad Lutheran until he married my mother, we weren't really what you would call overly religious or overly devout, but they had the teachings. So so they still knew there was more than, just this physical state. 'Cause my dad had a lot of encounters with activity that most people would say like is ghostly, and some other very mystical paranormal type experiences. So from there, I came back unwillingly, and I started to have like knowings. I felt like I lived in deja vu most of my childhood into adulthood, where like, did that happen already? Or this is going to happen? And I had prophetic dreams. I could tell if a spirit was preparing to leave the body. It almost looked like a wax dummy. Like, how they look kind of shiny. And I asked Spirit not to see that anymore. Like, I'm like, no, I don't want to see this, because it was very traumatic because I was young, and I almost felt like I would cause their death, or like I felt responsible if I couldn't save them, because sometimes I got a knowing, or I knew something was wrong, and like with my aunt, I knew, and I told her to go to the doctor, make him listen. He didn't. She died 2 weeks later. My grandmother too, I told my mom there's something not right. She seems slow. I just have this feeling. Same thing about 2 weeks. So I'm not sure if that's the time period when the spirit starts, but that's kind of my experience with it. Like that's when it starts to detach. In later years, once I started having my own children, I could sense like when people were pregnant, even if or going to be pregnant, like up until a year or so afterwards. I think it's more that now with a broader understanding and 3 more near-death experiences and a 2019 connection to oneness, I have a little bit bigger understanding that I think I was sensing the energies that were around them from my understanding and things I've learned of myself. Sometimes, these spirit energies that are coming in, they're kind of like checking out if like this is a fit for me. Do I want to be born into this family? Because I was given the understanding during one of my experiences, one of the things my family thought was a ghost encounter was me visiting my siblings, because I was born 5 years after the youngest and 12 years after the oldest. So I knew I wouldn't get to play with my sisters, because they were 10 and 12 by the time I was born. So I played with their doll things. There was this big heart. My mom always talked about, like, the ghost made a heart out of their doll clothes. Well, from something I was given, like, that was me, and I was just trying to connect with them. I have like a psychic mediumship and the clair abilities and various other things, but as far as like helping others or I have a healing practice. It's always whatever the highest good is for someone. And that's what I ask for. Spirit, I don't tell spirit what to do. It's always like, so I have these various abilities, but they only flow for me to like, I was shown this literally, that to be in the right place, the right time for a soul. Like, so to be what spirit's trying to bring them